So my name is Rosalind Dix, and I'm with the Billings, Montana Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and I also have Deanna Lehman on with us, and we're going to be co-presenting today. Just if any of you are new to getting help from PTAC, if you're not really aware of what we do provide free assistance to business owners on how to contract with the government. So that could be helping you with registrations. It could be helping you with solicitations, helping you make yourself more visible to federal and state and local buyers. We will also help you kind of navigate the whole marketplace and help you decide where you fit within the whole spectrum of government contracting. And we do all this for free. We have several locations around the state of Montana. You can, if you're not in the Billings area, if you're in Missoula or Great Falls, you can go to our website, which is montanaptac.org, and click on locations, and you can see who the advisor is in your area so that you can get some one-on-one assistance with the advisor that's within your area. Today we are going to talk about SAM, just pretty high level review, but many people, and most of you I think already have a SAM registration, but a lot of people they do their SAM registration and then they just kind of go through the motions of renewing their SAM, but they never really look at it again to make sure it's accurate. Maybe they didn't get any help with it the first time, and maybe you were unsure of the information you input in there. So we're just here to kind of let you ask questions at the end and to provide you some information of some of the key parts that are really important to think about in your SAM registration. And our presentation isn't very long, so there'll be plenty of time for you to ask questions. Just go ahead and you can type them in the chat, or we can unmute your mic, and you can use the raise your hand function on your screen. If you kind of hover at the bottom, you should see a raise your hand function, and you can ask it live that way if you'd like. So we'll just go ahead and get started here. Okay. All right. So a lot of this is review, but I just really want to go over some of this information. It's really important. So first of all, let's just talk about what the purpose of SAM is. So SAM, it stands for the System for Award Management. And if you want to sell your products and services to the government, to the federal government, you need to be in this system. It's how you get paid on a federal contract. They pay you through your electronic funds transfer to the checking account that's in your SAM. You answer a lot of compliance questions. You may remember those. A lot of them are, have you been debarred from doing federal contracting? Do you have unpaid tax liability? That sort of thing. There's lots of compliance questions in there. So those are two of the main reasons. It also provides visibility for your company to federal buyers. So if you're not in that system, federal buyers don't even know that you're there and want to sell your products to the government. That being said, I do want to say, just because you are in SAM, doesn't mean that the government's going to call you. There's other things you need to do. You need to look for the opportunities and apply for them. So it doesn't mean that you'll get a phone call, but it is important that you're in there. That's how you are visible to them. Agencies do look at your SAM to see if you have been debarred from contracting or have any exclusions for your business. They can't do business with you if you are on that list. They have to check to see if you're active in SAM, because the agencies can't award anything to a business unless you have an active SAM registration. And on the other side of that, vendors actually aren't allowed to submit a bid unless they have an active SAM registration. Agencies also use SAM to do market research. And when they're doing this, what they're really trying to do is find research vendors to see if they're to help them with their procurement strategy. If there's a possibility that maybe they can set a specific procurement aside, so maybe for small business or woman-owned small business, the government will look in SAM and say, oh, well, I see all these woman-owned small businesses, so I can expect to receive at least 2 or more offers from woman-owned small businesses. So yes, we can set this opportunity aside for woman-owned small business. That's an example of what they're looking for when they're doing their market research in SAM. And SAM is connected to a lot of other federal systems. It is the foundation. If you are looking to apply for a special certificate, those systems are, you need to have a SAM registration to get into those systems. Or some of the invoicing systems, you have to have a SAM registration in order to be to get into that invoicing system and invoice the federal government. So it's a very important system, and it's important that the information is accurate as well. So let's talk about what business name should be in SAM. So it should be your exact legal business name that is in the Secretary of State. So and it has to, whatever's on your governing documents, including Inc. or LLC and punctuation like commas. And this is the information that, is given to Dun & Bradstreet, and then they issue the DUNS number, which then allows you to register in SAM, which most of you know, most of you should have a SAM registration. Sole proprietors should be listed under their personal name and not their DBA or assumed business name. We see this a lot, and a lot of times their assumed business name or DBA ends up on their contract, and that's not good, and that's not correct. Government contracts need to have the proper legal name that matches SAM, matches the contract. It can cause problems later, and we've seen more recently that sort of thing is getting caught a lot more and can cause problems. I mean, if they see that your SAM registration isn't accurate, then they need you to fix it, which is its own separate process, and possibly could prevent a vendor from getting paid if it's if the old one expires in the meantime. So it's just really important to have that legal business name correct from the very beginning. But as you'll see in another slide, we'll talk about if you do need to change it. So address that should be in SAM. So it has to be a physical address. Dun & Bradstreet won't even issue you a DUNS number unless it's a physical address. Can't have a PO box, but there is a spot for a mailing address in SAM. So if you have a PO box, then you can put a PO box as the mailing. If you move locations, or if you happen to you're on and you're new to SAM, then it is okay if you're co-located with another business. You just have to include the suite number, and that does trigger questions from a department called CAGE, which is Commercial and Government Entity, and they issue CAGE codes, which is similar to a DUNS number, but but it's issued for by the military and for the use on military contracts. But it's another way for your business to be identified based on the name and the physical location. So if you are co-located, then you will get questions from CAGE, and you just have to explain to them that what you'll have to answer whether you're related to the business or not, and you may have to provide some documentation to them. So what happens if you need to change your legal name or address? So currently, Dun & Bradstreet still holds the agreement with the federal government to provide DUNS numbers. Well, that's also the place that you need to go first to change your legal name and your address. And again, you may have to provide documentation to them from the Secretary of State if it's a name change. So just be aware of that. So once it's changed in Dun & Bradstreet, then you can pull in the new name into SAM or a new address. But again, what that does is it triggers CAGE to ask questions regarding this change. You know, was there an acquisition that happened? You know, basically, why did you change it? Or why did you change addresses? And you just have to, you know, it's about 5 or 6 questions that they ask, and you have to respond to them in a timely manner. You know, within 3 business days. So they send you an email, you have to answer the questions and provide any documentation that they ask you for and send it to them. And like I say at the bottom, it's not a hard process, but it's really important to respond in a timely manner. Otherwise, you have to start the process over again, and it just causes delays. And if you're just if you just have a SAM registration, but you don't have any existing contracts, you know, it's maybe not a big deal. But if you're in the middle of a contract and you're waiting to get paid, I mean, this can cause problems. So it's really important that it's best if you can have it done correctly from the beginning, but if you do have to do it in the middle of a contract, I would suggest getting the help of PTAC, because we are experts and we have been through this many times and encountered a lot of interesting things. So reach out to your local PTAC if you have to go through this process. So this slide is about choosing an administrator for your SAM, which you do when you create your SAM. You create your login through login.gov, and you create your user account within SAM. So in SAM, you have the username is separate from the registration. They're 2 different things. You create the user account, and then you create the registration for the entity. And the administrator is in control of that. You can have multiple administrators if you choose. We won't necessarily get into that, and multiple users. But it's important to choose an administrator that is, you know, going to be with the business, you know, long term, at least an email address that's going to be with the business long term. You know, because if people are leaving the business a lot, or, you know, and then they take that user, that account access, that goes away with their email, which goes away when they go away, then you're talking about going through another process of creating a new user account and attaching your registration to that user account, and it's its own separate process. So I just encourage you to be thoughtful about who that administrator is and what the email is that you use to gain access to SAM. Oh, and I think I'm going to hand it over to Deanna, and she's going to start talking about NAICS code. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Roz. Hang on while I share mine here. Okay, can everybody see the slide on the NAICS codes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Roz. Really good information. And you know, while SAM isn't the most glamorous subject, it's one of the most important subjects in all of federal contracting for sure. Like Roz said earlier, it's really the foundation of all federal contracting, and everything kind of mushrooms out from that, so to speak. So very important. It's a dynamic situation, very important to kind of stay on top of it, keep it fresh, keep it accurate, keep the information current, etc. And so so today we're, you know, just highlighting some of the areas that we think are really important, and areas that we see that are oftentimes, you know, either incorrect or incomplete. And one of those areas are NAICS codes. Of course, NAICS codes, as you know, go into SAM. They are used by the federal government to uniquely identify industries. And in SAM, the NAICS codes, the purpose is really to tell a story about the products and services your company provides. And it's very important to include all the NAICS codes that are applicable to what your company does. And most companies certainly have, you know, several NAICS codes that are applicable to what they do. So real important to do some research on NAICS codes and make sure you're finding all the proper codes, because there can be several. And the NAICS codes too, and I'm going to show you an example of just one, but the NAICS codes are, just keep in mind, they're somewhat generic. Some are very specific, but there can, under one NAICS code, for example, there can be a multitude of different definitions that at times don't even seem like they're related. But even if your company does one thing on that definition list, that code probably should go in your profile. And, the reason that these codes matter in SAM, the NAICS codes, and then I'll talk about the product service codes in a minute, is because the federal agencies, the buyers, the small business specialists, et cetera, they search SAM and they search its associated SBA profile. We'll look at that in a minute too. But they do that to conduct their market research and find vendors they need. So very important to have codes in there that apply. And let me show you an example here. I'm going to pull up the NAICS website. I'll have to stop sharing for a minute, so bear with me. Okay, is that showing up okay, the NAICS website? Okay. So make sure you go, and this, we'll send these slides out, and there's a hyperlink there for you, but this is the official NAICS website. Notice it's .gov. There's a lot of .com websites out there, and they probably have the right codes, but really this is the official source for the code. So this is where you do your research, and the way you do the research is just start entering keywords that are salient to what your company does. So for example, if I were to enter the word truck, which I already have, but I'll just enter it again to illustrate, you can see a host of codes pop up on the screen. And so not all of them, of course, are going to be applicable. It's a matter of searching down through the list. There's different categories per industry. So notice here in the 300 series, these are, if you notice at the end, these are manufacturing codes. And so sometimes even if you're a service provider, manufacturing codes are appropriate to put in your SAM registration because you may still be a supplier of that particular manufacturer's product. Like for example, let's say you're a roofer. Certainly you have, you're supplying the roofing supplies. So there's a code for roofing specifically, but then I might also include some of the codes for that. But let's scroll down a little bit and see for the trucking codes. These are all still manufacturing codes, but if you keep scrolling down, then you start to get into a different series. And so if I'm a trucking company, I'm going to want to include the codes that are applicable to the type of trucking that I provide. So there's, long distance trucking, there's short haul trucking, et cetera, et cetera. You can see here, notice here, I clicked on this earlier, so they're a different color, but this is the same code, but yet there's different descriptions that fit under that code. And if you were to click on that code and scroll down, you would see what I'm talking about here. This is all the same code, yet all these different definitions. So you kind of have to open up the codes really to understand what product or service is attributed to that code. And like I say, even if one definition fits, it's a code that should probably go in your SAM registration. And so you can see here, if I'm a trucking company and I'm short distance, long distance, I'm going to go down here. Here's some long distance codes. Here's dump truck, flatbed, and some of these are the same. So you have to kind of pay attention to that. But that's really the best way to do research on your codes. And we can always help you with that part as well. I mean, we do a lot of this and we see a lot of codes, so we kind of know where they're all at. But that's the NAICS codes. And then I'm going to have to go back to my PowerPoint. Hang on. Go up one slide here. So the product service codes, I'm not going to go and show you those, but those are also really important to do some research on. There's a hyperlink there for you and we can help you. But the product service codes and the federal supply codes are also, and I forgot to mention, every federal solicitation has a NAICS code attached to it. So when the contracting team at any particular agency, whether it's BLM or, Malmstrom Air Force Base, they're doing their their homework on their project, and they're looking for NAICS codes and attaching it to that particular opportunity. And so that's the other reason, you know, they're important to understand. And they also do the same thing with the product service codes and the federal supply codes. Those are a shorter series of codes. I like those codes, and I think they really enhance the story of your company in SAM, because they're very, where NAICS codes are kind of generic sometimes, the product service codes and federal supply codes are very, very specific. Usually, they can be very descriptive codes to add to your profile. It really tells a better story. And so the hyperlink is there for you to do some homework there. And we certainly see deficiencies in the NAICS codes that are in SAM registrations, but almost always, unless PTAC has helped to start, most companies don't have any of the PSC or the FSC codes in their profile. So that's really the essence of the codes. But the other reason the codes matter in SAM is because the codes are linked to the SBA size standards. And that's a whole nother discussion and another training, but I've given the link there for you. But really, this to summarize it, the size standards per SBA, it's how the government determines whether your company is small or not, okay? And so the NAICS codes, each NAICS codes are linked uniquely to either one of two standards, either sales or number of employees. So so when you put all the codes in SAM, you're going to see that it's linked it up, and you also put your sales and your employees in SAM. So the system kind of links the two of those up, and it tells you for all the codes that you have in SAM, whether your company is small or not under that code. So depending on your sales and your number of employees, you could conceivably, you know, we don't see this a lot, but we've seen it. You can be small in some codes per the government standards and not small in other codes. So, you know, that's okay. It's just that, again, it tells a story. You couldn't, what does that mean really? Well, it means if you're not small under a particular code and the government sets aside an opportunity for a small business, or maybe a woman-owned small business or HubZone, et cetera, you can't compete on that opportunity because you're not small under that code. Now, part of the reason we talked about doing this training is because, you know, if you put the wrong sales numbers in there, for example, and we're going to look at an example of that, you know, you could end up showing your business as not small when it really is if you don't calculate the receipts properly. And that doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. So it's just really important to understand the relationship between, you know, the market research the buyers do, the story the codes tell, and the relationship to the SBA size standards. So let's go to the next slide here. So I talked about receipts. This is a big deal. This is one of the areas we definitely see a lot of mistakes in. And notice we're using the word receipts. I use the word sales, but it's really actually receipts is the official term, you know, from the CFR and the definition from SBA and how to calculate your receipts for SAM. And this hyperlink here provides the actual definition and the how-to on how to properly calculate your receipts. We'll look at a little example, but basically it's not an average of your top line, you know, gross sales or your top line revenue. It's an average of total income, which is after cost of goods. So it's total income plus cost of goods. And then there's but the important thing about that is there are exceptions to how you calculate receipts. So very important to understand those exceptions. And I think I will just click in here and show you the definition or what the exceptions are. So hang on, I probably need to reshare.
No, you're good. Oh, you were good.
I was good. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. All right, we'll get back. We'll get back. Okay, can you see it now, Roz?
Yeah.
So I know this is pretty word heavy, but it gives the definition here. And what I want to point out is the exceptions. And there's not exceptions for every industry, but there's some key exceptions that are really important to understand. And the exceptions start right here. You know, receipts do not include net capital gains or losses, taxes collected for and remitted to a taxing authority, you know, if included in gross or total income, you know, sales or other taxes collected from customers, et cetera, et cetera. And right here is where we kind of get, where we see difficulties. Proceeds from transactions between a concern and its domestic or foreign affiliates. That's kind of a big deal because a lot of companies, you know, we've seen companies where there's multiple entities, the multiple entities exchange business with each other, even though they're affiliated with each other. So that would be a really important distinction and an example of where you would want to back out some of those sales. And then, you know, there's other examples here. Travel agents, you know, they're basically brokers. And so all of the, you know, they always look like they have a, you know, tremendous amount of top line revenue, but really most of it is getting paid out to, you know, airlines and other industry related customers, and they're just keeping a portion. And so that all has to be adjusted to reflect the proper sales in SAM. We saw an example recently. It says right here, freight forwarder or customs broker. For years, they had their revenue or their receipts in SAM incorrect because they were taking the top line gross rather, and they weren't backing out, you know, the brokered part of the revenue, and so it caused them to show as a large business, which caused them all kinds of problems when they went to get a certification they really needed for a pretty large opportunity. And so just know that there are some examples of exceptions to how receipts are calculated. But let's go down. Can you see the screen now, Ross?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So, and I just put this slide in just so that you can see the way that you calculate the receipts depends on your legal structure and your tax returns. So, for example, here for a corporation, you know, it's Form 1120. The receipts equals, you know, line 11 plus line 2, and you know, gives some other guidance here. But where an S corp, you know, it's going to be a different line on the tax return, line 6 plus line 2, and you know, Schedule C is typically line 7 and line.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, you're kind of quiet.
Oh, I'm quiet. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I'll talk louder. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. So anyway, that's just we can help you with this too, but just know that oftentimes, you know, you need to continually update your receipts in SAM and make sure that they're calculated properly to start with. And so, okay, Roz, can you see the DSPS slide now?
Yep.
So moving on to another database, really important, has part of SAM. It's actually a different database than SAM. It's the SBA Dynamic Small Business Search. And it is separate from SAM, but I always say it's connected to SAM. One of the ways, there's two ways to put information in it, but one of the primary ways is that you put the information in it at the end of SAM. There's a link when you get to the very end of your SAM registration that says, do you want to update your SBA profile? And so a lot of companies don't know what that is, so they don't click into the new screen and go into the profile. So as a result, their profile is empty. And I'll show you an example of it in a minute. But the reason this profile matters, I mentioned earlier that contracting officers from federal agencies, small business specialists, you know, they'll do their market research in SAM. They'll search by NAICS codes, maybe PSC or FSC codes, but they also will go to this dynamic small business search and search for companies that way. They'll search by geographic area, by set aside. They can search by keywords. They can search by NAICS. There's any number of ways to filter and segment, you know, the search criteria. So it's a very powerful way to market your company to federal buyers, and because they do go in here and rely on it quite a bit. And like I say, most companies don't know what this is, so they leave it blank. And we'll look at an example. But yeah, why don't we just look at the example now? Let me pull it up so you can see what it looks like here. Is it showing, Roz?
Yes, yep.
Wonderful. So this is what it looks like, and it's, maybe a little bit, the interface is sort of dated, but this is what they're still using. So you can see here the location of the profile. You can filter by state, and we'll do that in a minute and run a NAICS code in it. But let's just scroll down and take a little closer look at it. You can also separate it by county if you wanted to look for companies in a certain county. You can filter it by whether or not a company is HubZone or 8A, or, they wouldn't be in here at all if they're not a small business. This is also the other reason your NAICS codes are important, because if you're not showing small under at least one NAICS code in your SAM registration, this profile won't even open up and you won't even be able to fill it out. But you can see here all the different areas, but here is where probably the most commonly used would be the NAICS code, searching by NAICS codes, and then whether or not they take credit, your company takes credit cards, all of those things are in SAM. So some of the information in this profile gets pulled over from SAM, and then other information you manually input. And we'll look at an example. You can search by DUNS number, by cage code, so on and so forth. But let's go back up and do just a search in Montana so I can show you what a contracting officer might see. I'm not going to limit it by county. I'll just do Montana. I'm going to scroll down here and we'll just stick with the trucking idea. I'm going to put in a trucking code. And notice here, this is kind of an important distinction too. It's going to default to the active SAM registrations. You could also search by expired, but if I'm a contracting officer, I need you to be active in SAM, so I'm pretty much going to default to that. So keep your SAM registration active. And then go down here, search, and this will pull up all of the companies in Montana that have that code in their SAM registration. And you're going to be able to see, so that looks like we got 40 results, and they are filtered randomly. They're not in alphabetical order or anything like that. And so every time you search, you're going to get a different order. But you can see here, all these companies have that code in their profile, but notice something. There's a capabilities narrative here, and you can see that some companies have great information in here, and other companies don't have any information in here. And so if I'm a contracting officer and I search by a code, where are my eyes going to go? To the companies with the story or the blank ones? And, I would probably, at least at first, look at the ones with some information. But let's look at one that maybe doesn't have information. Let's just pick this first one. So this is what the profile looks like. And you can see here that, like I say, certain information comes over. They do have their website in here. Happy to see that. The primary government point of contact from SAM comes over here. DUNS and cage codes, of course. And current principles, usually that's a field that in the profile that you have to fill out manually. So this is empty. They don't have any certifications. These probably would show up from SAM. HubZone would show up from SAM if they were actually certified. But one of the most important parts is right here. There's that capabilities narrative. That's the opportunity to really tell a great story about how your company, what it provides and how it can help an agency, solve a problem or fill a need. And there's also a spot here for special equipment or materials. Some companies, if you're a construction company, you might put equipment here. If you're some other type of industry, I've seen companies put their brands in here. Sometimes, there's brand specific things the government's looking for. This company actually has a pretty nice selection of codes. You notice here, they've got all different kind of trucking codes in here. There's always a primary one, as you know, and that's this is their primary. But down here is keywords. This is another area that we could have searched, the profile by keywords. We didn't. We chose a NAICS code. But a contracting officer might use the word truck or trucking or short distance or something like that. And of course, if they do it that way, this company isn't going to pop up because it doesn't have those words in its profile. So important to fill those words out. And then performance history, very important part of this profile, because one of the things that the government really cares about, and when I say government, I'm talking the federal government, especially in this case, because this is a federal database, they really value and care about past performance history. So if this company has done government contracting for, let's say just BLM or maybe DOD or whoever, they should put that history in here, because it really shows another agency that, it's got good performance history and some experience working with the government. And so, so again, just is, usually inadvertent, but this is one of the key areas that we see lacking when it comes to SAM registration and keeping everything current and visible to the buyers. Anything you'd want to add there, Roz? Miss anything?
No, I mean, I just kind of, I tell people to think of it as, if you're in a city or a new city and you're Googling to try to find restaurants, I mean, you usually look at the ones that have websites, you can look at their menu and look at pictures. But, if you see one that just doesn't either have anything come up, then you may be less likely to go to that restaurant. So I think it's important to have something in that profile, because it's kind of like doing a Google search. You want your business to show up.
Great, thank you, Roz. Okay, all right. Are you back where you can see me now, the slides?
Yep.
Okay. So another reason, for SAM, of course, is this was a change recently, but it used to be that per the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, you had to have an active SAM registration before you could be awarded a contract. Well, now that's actually changed, and now you actually have to have an active SAM registration before you even submit your bid. So another reason to think ahead a little bit. If it's a new SAM registration, it cannot be done in a day. It takes a good 10 days oftentimes. Sometimes it goes quicker, but it can take a good 10 days for a brand new SAM registration that's never been active before to go active. And if it's a renewal situation, that's usually actually pretty quick, but that depends on, have you kept track of your user account? Do you know how to get back into the SAM registration? Do you have your username and passwords, et cetera, et cetera? And so it's definitely not a last minute thing, generally speaking. And so the better job that you can do in thinking ahead, making some ticklers on your calendar, just don't let it expire. It's better if you can keep it active. That way you'll just be ready to respond, if an opportunity comes your way and you need it to be active. And we didn't really put this in a slide, but one of the areas we see companies spin their wheels a lot on is just keeping a good system for keeping track of your login information for all these government sites. I mean, SAM is just one. There's others. We recommend usually some sort of dedicated, system, government contracting notebook, something like that. The more time you spend keeping track of the information, the less time you're going to spend trying to get back into some of these systems when you need to. And so we spend a lot of our time, we don't do just SAM registrations at PTAC, we do a lot more than that, but we do a lot of helping people get back into their, into their systems because they've lost all their information. So anything there, Roz, you want to add?
No, that's perfect.
So in the future, right now, SAM is still its own dedicated website, but there's been, over the last number of years, actually started in 2012, quite a movement in the federal government to simplify some of this and put more of these systems in one place. And so you're seeing a gradual movement to a one-stop shop, and that's beta.sam.gov. A few of the old systems that we used to work in a lot, like Federal Business Opportunities, FBO.gov, I'm sure some of you are familiar there. That one's already moved over. I think that was last November it moved over. And then some of the others that are green there, CFDA and PPIRS. PPIRS, it's for short, is a performance system or an evaluation system used by the federal buyers. So a lot of it's moved over already. So SAM and FPDS, that's another federal system where the historical purchasing data is housed, and that will be moving over as well. So those are in the process of being moved. They're not there yet. So you still log in to SAM on its own website, but eventually you will go to beta.sam.gov to get into your SAM registration. And your username and password, if you have a login.gov account now, that will work on this site. So you won't have to create a whole new user account or anything like that. You know, what you're using now to get into SAM will work here as well. We don't really know when this is going to happen. You know, there's been different projected timelines. We were hearing December for a while of this year, but now lately we haven't heard so much about the date. And so, you know, wait and see. This sort of thing takes, as you can imagine, a lot of time to move over. So that's where SAM is going in the future. And but anyway, again, from a marketing standpoint and from an accuracy standpoint, SAM is pretty important. And, you know, Roz mentioned earlier, it's connected to all these other systems. So having it correct in SAM, it really saves a lot of heartburn with some of these other systems that it's connected to. And we know a lot about how to fix problems in SAM and how to do it right the first time. So please let us help you. And you know, like Ross said, PTAC is here really to support your government contracting efforts and teach you how to realize these opportunities. We're specialists, that's all we do. Our program is funded by Department of Defense, and then local match goes into it also. But PTACs are all over the country. All of the states have PTACs. And like Ross said, in Montana, we have 6 locations. And so just go to montanaptac.org and you can find the advisor that's nearest you. So that's what we have for SAM. Do we have any questions in the chat, Roz?
Let's see. I had one. I answered it already. Please ask questions, or if you wanna, we can, you know, you can ask it live. We can unmute your mic, or however you want to do it. So please ask away. It could be about what we talked about today in SAM, or maybe you have a different SAM question that we didn't cover. Yeah. Feel free to ask. Let's see. Becky is asking, on the capabilities narrative, how long should that be? There is a character limitation. I can't remember what it is, but I would say a good paragraph, you know, like a solid 3 to 5 sentences. I mean, what do you think, Deanna?
Yeah, for sure. A succinct, you know, paragraph, you know, very descriptive. You can say more with less oftentimes, and so that's usually, and we can help you kind of craft it too. But what I like to encourage businesses to do is, you know, the succinct paragraph, very descriptive. And then if there's room, I always like to have them add a link to their website right at the end of the capabilities narrative, just because, as you saw when I did that search with the NAICS code, the capabilities narrative popped right up. And so the more that you can drive the buyers to your website, I think the better. And so that's usually kind of how we do it here. But yeah, it's just a short paragraph for sure.
And then we have another question about how to access the DSBS website. So there really is 2 ways, but we're gonna only tell you one because this is the easiest way. Is so you log into your SAM registration and you act like you're going to update it. So you hit update and you go through the whole thing, save and continue, and the very last section after the point of contact, there's a button kind of in the middle of the page that says SBA or Small Business Profile, and you click it and it opens up a separate browser window, and then you'll see it there. So you can fill out your information, and then it's very important that you go back to SAM and resubmit and hit submit. Otherwise it saves, your changes won't take effect if you made any, and you don't want it to be a work in progress. You want to resubmit it so that it's always active, stays active.
Yeah. And we have very detailed instructions that I think are helpful if you, in terms of how to get to the SBA profile and if you want those, just email Roz or I, and we can send them to you. But two things that I'll just mention really quick, and this kind of goes back to your, keeping records, but don't lose your MPIN. Your MPIN is your marketing partner identification number, and you don't need it a lot, but it's something you created in SAM when you first did the registration. And it used to be you could just see what it was and update it easily, but now they've changed it where if you don't know what your MPIN is, you've got to go through this whole reset process that's really kind of annoying. It's time consuming. And so the better job you do keeping your MPIN, the better. And also the other thing is bank account information. It used to be that you could just update bank account information. You change banks, you need to update your business account in SAM. I mean, you certainly want to keep that current, but used to be you could just do that. Well, now you cannot do that unless you have the old bank account information. So it's a really big deal. If you change banks and you need to change it in SAM, keep track of that routing and account number. Don't lose it until we can help you too, but get it. That's what you're going to need in order to put a new bank information in there.
Becky asks, if our registration expires in 10 days, should we update now and then make an appointment to review and fix any problems with you afterwards? I mean, I guess it kind of depends. I mean, if you already have an active SAM registration and you renew it now, it'll stay active quickly. There's not usually a delay. So then you can, as soon as you can go in and make changes again later. You just have to, every time you make a change, you have to resubmit. So you can do it as you're renewing. Maybe you need to add some NAICS codes or update the revenue, do that information. You can do that as you're renewing. Same with the SBA profile. Or if you want to, if it's like, 10 days, and maybe you can't get an appointment with us right away, go ahead, renew it so that it stays active, and then, we can help you go in and fix something. So either way, I would say. If it's a name change or an address change, I would call a PTAC right away and just get that going.
And usually if we work with a company on a new registration, I mean, we're talking about renewals, but if you had a new one, we have very thorough, detailed, we kind of jokingly call it homework that we have you do that helps you think about getting the right NAICS codes and getting the right information in your SBA profile. So we can work with you directly or maybe give you a little homework in advance or whatever. But yeah, it's better to keep it active. Don't let it expire. So it's better to keep it active and then review it after for sure.
Yeah.
I want to just say, I'm sorry, Roz.
I just have another question.
That's okay. I was just going to say, if you haven't signed in your company name or your name, would you please do that in the chat box for us? We appreciate it. Go ahead.
There's somebody on who's representing a nonprofit, and I believe it is a different process. Do you offer training for us? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess it depends what is a nonprofit doing. I mean, there's two paths in SAM. There's a grant path, and then there's a contract path. So if the nonprofit is just applying for grants, then yes, it is a slightly different path. It's not as lengthy, and we could help them with that, or at least go over it with them. Is that right, Deanna?
Yeah, I mean, technically, our charge as a PTAC per Congress is to help entities, not just businesses, but entities that are contracting with the government. So sometimes nonprofits actually contract with the government. Let's take in a hospital, for example. We've even seen municipalities that are contracting with a federal agency. So in that case, certainly PTAC help is appropriate. We're never not going to help anybody though. If you're stuck in SAM, I mean, we just can't count you as a client, which that's irrelevant to you. But we will certainly help you troubleshoot problems and get through the path. And the grants path in SAM, or the federal assistance path is really what it's called, is not has involved. I mean, there's not all these keywords and SBA profile to fill out. You don't even put NAICS codes in there. It's really a matter of clicking federal assistance, maybe answering a few questions, putting your bank account info in there, clicking submit. It's a much simpler, shorter path in SAM.
but yes, we can give you some guidance.
Yes.
Absolutely. And Barney made a good point. He said, as far as helping you with your passwords, is to use a password manager, which in your website, which I use one and I really like it. You know, and he says as an alternative to a notebook. So it is good, but even believe me, a notebook or a binder for government for passwords is also really key. Keep those passwords somewhere. That just makes life a lot easier.
Whatever works, you know,
Whatever works.
Whatever works.
So let's see, as a nonprofit, who would want to contract? Let's see. Who would want to contract? We should have 2 applications, 2 accounts.
No. One SAM registration. So if you're a nonprofit and you have the possibility of contracting with the government, let's say you're a nonprofit that maybe you provide some kind of specialized healthcare services or whatnot, you would simply, all the rules apply, the proper legal name, et cetera, but then you would choose the contract path in SAM and choose NAICS codes and all of those things. And that would cover your entity, whether you're contracting or whether you're pursuing a federal grant for something, okay? So the contract path really covers both areas, where if you never are going to contract for anything, like for example, our organization here, Big Sky Economic Development Authority, we have a SAM registration because we are receiving federal funds from different agencies to help with our programs here. Like we get monies from Department of Defense, monies from SBA, monies from EDA. And so we have a SAM registration too, but we're not in the contracting path in SAM. We're only in the financial assistance path in SAM because we don't sell anything. So we're not selling our products and our services here. But if you're a nonprofit and you actually are selling products or services and you have the potential to do contracting, you should, as a nonprofit, you still mark yourself as a nonprofit in there and fill out your NAICS codes and everything, but you would choose the contracting path. And the only difference there is your SBA profile is not going to show up. And the reason for that is because the SBA profile shows up when you check that you're a for-profit entity, where nonprofits aren't. And so the SBA profile for a nonprofit isn't going to show up, but the NAICS codes and the PSC codes still tell a good story. So not 2 separate ones, just one for the entity on the contract path.
I don't see any other questions. I mean, if there are, please feel free to ask. If not, we can end and everybody can have a good day. I'll send
Looks
out.
like Becky.
Oh, Becky?
Yeah, the list of 20, did you comply with this federal regulation questions? Is it okay to make your best guess or look up all the regulations? Well, that's where I would say have us help you, because usually we can at least somewhat explain the regulations as you go. With that said, this is a federal registration, and when you sign that you have read and agree, the government is assuming you have read the regs and you know what you're signing and agreeing to. So, but we can help explain a lot about some of the FAR clauses that you see in the SAM registration.
Let's see. Oh, and then Carolyn asked, how do you invoice for payment? You will want to look at your contract. There's different invoicing systems that different agencies use. For example, there's Invoice Processing Platform, or IPP, which is used by Forest Service, BIA, BLM, several use it. And in your contract, it'll say you need to invoice through this system. And then if it's Department of Defense, you're going to have to invoice through a system, most likely through a system called Wide Area Workflow. I've seen other contracts where it simply says you need to work with the point of contact, and maybe they have an internal accounts department that you send your invoice to. So you just need to pay attention to your contract and invoice the way they tell you to.
And we can help with that too.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Do we miss anything?
I don't see anything. Let's see. Can I sign up at sam.gov? I'm sorry, Bill, I'm not really sure what you mean. You can sign up on sam.gov if you're not in it. But SAM is really just, it's how you get paid on a federal contract and how you become visible as a vendor to the federal government. So if you do want to sign up for sam.gov, PTAC would be happy to help you with that.
Yeah, don't suffer through it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that's really part of the idea here is PTAC is here to, you know, we don't get contracts for your company. That's, you know, that's companies get their own contracts, but we lead you to the path. We help you with these systems. If at the end of the day, we can somehow make it clearer, easier, and more efficient for you to get on to doing business, that's our aim. And so that's where, but if you want PTAC help, just give Roz or I a call. And, you know, if you're not in our area, we'll get you with the right advisor and get you signed up to be a client, and then help you with SAM or whatever else you have in mind for contracting.
I'm just putting my information in the chat really quick.
Yeah, and I think, are you going to send the slides out to Roz?
I will, yeah. And then Becky also asked how linked is the login.gov to the existing SAM.gov system? It's directly linked. So when you go to log in, when you go to the SAM.gov website and you click login, it redirects you to login.gov because I mean, I think it's been like 2 years now. They've changed to login.gov as a more secure way to log in. So then it provides two-factor authentication. So it's directly linked to sam.gov, but login.gov is used for many other systems, other federal systems as well. I think that's the idea, is for all these federal systems to kind of move towards login.gov as the way to log in. So hopefully you may in the future not need so many usernames and passwords eventually.
That's right.
All right, I don't see any other questions. But yeah, I'll send everything out, and the recording, I'll send it out. I usually put those on our YouTube channel as well, so you can always reference it again later if you want. But yeah, please reach out anytime you have questions or need some assistance. We're here to help. And
thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.